In today's video, we're gonna make a airplane crash explosion effect. No action VFX is like another. In every single one, you have to rethink how to make certain things. And I hope in today's video, you're gonna learn a lot of unconventional methods to do visual effects. Sup you phonies, how's it going? Welcome to another video, and I'm very excited about today because we just went outside and I shot this little clip of me goofing around. In case you haven't noticed, a lot of my VFX are about me hiding behind my leather coat from like airplane crashes, crashing towers, and even giant monsters. Since those videos got a lot of recognition on the social medias, I decided I'm gonna make a tutorial on that and break it down for you. Lots of unconventional methods to do visual effects. Let's go. Starting with the motion tracking. We are of course working with Blender, but in case you've worked with Blender's motion tracking before, you noticed that it is quite difficult. It doesn't always work, and we are going to try it with this video too. But if it doesn't work, I'm gonna show you another method how you can track your footage so you can bring your VFX into your footage and composite it all together. So now we are here in Blender. We're gonna try to track our footage. It's my first time trying it, so if it doesn't work, so be it. So this is my clip here. Where we actually gonna try to start tracking is gonna be somewhere here, because I want my visual effects to be around this area. So under frame 190, this is where it starts. So I'm just gonna set scene frames because I for now want entire video to be in the timeline. So I'm just gonna see where this area starts, so around frame 176. So I'm just gonna go in fast motion because my footage is very shaky, and I'm just gonna set a bunch of markers where I want my VFX to be. Trees are usually not a good idea to track, but I don't have that many options, so I'm just gonna try a bunch and see how it goes. I'm gonna select them all, scale them up, and let's track forward and see how good of a track we can get. And I don't believe it's gonna work. See here, I'm also blocking the tracking marker, so this one becomes useless. So as you can see, at some point all of those tracking markers get blocked by me, so that doesn't work at all. So let's just try to track from here. Maybe that's going to be better. And select a few markers here on this building because it's the only thing I can really track. Anything in the background here. Now let's track forward. Like I said, most of those trackers not gonna work out, especially because there's like so much movement going on and it's just not gonna work. But I'm gonna show you a different method how you can deal with this. So first I'm gonna go to Premiere. I have my video loaded in here. So now I'm just gonna try to find a frame where I see most of the sky as clear as possible, like something like here, because again my VFX are going to be in this circle here. All the other stuff I don't really need. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a LUTs to it so I can work on my footage a little better inside of Blender. And the idea is what I'm trying to do. So now there's a LUT on it. Maybe I'm gonna go a little down with the highlights so I can get my sky a little back. Now the idea is I'm just gonna take a freeze frame out of this, bring this freeze frame into Blender so I can have somewhat the perspective aligned, because I don't really need a 3D track. A 2D track will be enough. I'm gonna do that after the fact. After I'm done in Blender and exported everything, then I'm gonna just track it all to my footage inside of After Effects, which has the better tracker. I can just select a few points because I only need two, really. I don't need a full 3D track, I just need a 2D track, the position and the rotation. But I'm gonna show you that in the end of this video. So for now, we're just gonna grab a screen grab. So I'm just gonna go export frame, save it into my folder, call it plane crash screenshot. Cool. Now let's get out of here. Now inside of Blender, I'm gonna import this screen grab. Under my camera settings, have your camera selected, and we're gonna add a background image, just an image, not a video. And here it is. Now I can see my background is here. So now I can just position the camera more or less the way I believe the camera is aligned. I can do a more exact job. If this has to be like perfect, I recommend using F-Spy or Perspective Plotter. I do have tutorials on that too. I'm gonna link them right now, like here, in case you have to align the perspective perfectly, but we don't. I'm just gonna align it more or less. So I know I shot this with a 24mm lens, so I'm gonna go on 24mm. I need the end clipping to be far because the effects are going to be far in the distance. So I'm just going to increase this number. So now I'm just going to bring this camera to where I believe it should be and align it with my character here. That's why I always start my scene with some kind of 3D model, so I have some perspective references and scale references. So here I'm a little crouching, so that's where this position be. Of course the actual camera, was turning and all that, but we don't need all this, at least not right now, because now I can frame my visual effects very nicely back here, and now we can get started on that. So first, I usually have a plane as the ground. I don't believe we're gonna need that, but just to help us with the alignment of our scene. So the ground is like somewhere like this, so I have my camera a little tilted, so I just have the beginning of the buildings aligned like that. Now I just have to import an airplane or whatever you want to crash, just import it. I have BlenderKit installed, and I also recommend you using BlenderKit because it has lots of free models. So when I just go here in BlenderKit, click on this guy, free first. So now when I type in plane, open this, I have like lots of free 3D models, like this paper plane, which I don't want. I want this plane, heavy lift cargo plane. Let's see if they have anything else. They have an Airbus as well. Now I'm just going to see which one looks better. I think this one has more detail. Let's go with this one. And usually those models always are in scale. So you see how gigantic my plane is here and how tiny my person is, so I know it is in scale. Now what we want to look out for, that position and rotation of your object is all on 0. Okay, that's very important because we're gonna animate our plane on a path. So you can see that my plane here has lots of different objects, and I could try to get through all of them and try to make them all one, but instead it also has a empty. So when I just animate this empty, it's also going to animate the rest of the plane. So again, make sure your position, your location and rotation is all on 0. Now I'm going to make a path where I want my plane to fly. So I could also just animate this position, so this is where the plane comes from. It's coming closer, getting into the right position, and it crashes right behind those buildings, like smack. I could animate it like this too, but you always have more control if you animate your flying objects or driving objects through a path. So now I'm going to show you how. Shift A, curve. Now I have this Bezier curve, there it is. And now my cube here, this is my empty, this is where my plane is in, or rather this is what my plane is parented to. So I'm gonna use a constraint. I'm gonna add a constraint, a follow path, and as the target object I'm gonna use the Bezier curve. Now when I see the offset here, I can see it's moving along the path. Obviously the rotation is not right yet, but that's fine. So now I'm just going to check the camera's looking this way, so our plane has to come from back there. So I'm going to take my Bezier curve and rotate it the way I want it to move. So I'm going to bring it also into the position where I want this to come from. You'll see right now it's just flying away. So I just changed this to -y and z. It always depends on how your object is aligned, but now it's perfectly aligned with my curve. So when I change the offset, it just goes along this path. So right now, of course, it's going in the wrong direction, so I can just rotate my curve 180 degrees and bring it to wherever I want it to be. So what I usually do is I go on the last position of my curve here, and that's where I animate, or that's where I model my curve. So when I go in edit mode of my curve, I can bring the vertice. I'm just working with my curve right now. I can bring this vertice wherever I want it to be in the very last moment. So I think like somewhere here, and I can see on my upper screen, this is where we look through the camera. Just bring it down so I can even rotate this so it's like crashing. Rotate it this way, maybe even closer to us, because those buildings, they were around, I would say like 50 meters away from me. So I can even see on this ground here, we aligned the ground before. The ground right now is 16 meters. So what I can do is just, I'm gonna bring the ground like directly where the camera is. Now, it's just a wild guess, so I'm just gonna model this a little bigger until this is around 50 meters. So I know, okay, this is where the buildings start. And that also is gonna help me to align my camera properly. Okay, let's go back to our curve. I think I do like the end position, like at least for like right now. Now I'm just gonna animate, or not animate, but bring the first position to where I want it to start. And for that also I should go under my object constraint. Instead of offset negative 95, I'm just gonna make it 0. So this is where I want it to start. So under my object now, under my curve, I can bring it to wherever I want it to start, which is like gonna be like somewhere back here. Also, if you zoom out too far and you don't see your object anymore, it is because under view you have to turn up your clipping so you can see further into the distance. So now let's go back to my curve here in edit mode, so I can turn it the way I want it. So let's say I want it to basically crash land, so I'm going to bring it further back, because this entire video is going to be quite long. When I go to Premiere, I can see my entire video is 27 seconds long, and we recorded in 23.98 frames, so I also going to change that here to that. We did record in 4K, but I'm not going to export in 4K because that would just take way too long. So I'm just going to export in full HD. So 24 frames times 27 seconds is around 650. So this is going to be my length of my scene. So I can even have it start a little higher, maybe like here. I could just also have it like behind those trees, because I always say that sandwiching your effects always looks good in post, but it would be like more work if it has to be like behind the trees, because you have to rotoscope it all out or key it all out. It's up to you if you want to do that. For now, I will not. So now when I go on my object here on the empty, under my constraint, I can animate this value. So I'm just gonna go, this is my first frame, so I'm just going to go to the very first frame, which is frame number 1. Over offset, I just hover over offset, hit I on the keyboard. Now I just made a keyframe. Now go to the very last frame, where actually I want this to be a little earlier, because I want the impact, the explosion. I want to see this actually. Usually I cut away before, but this time I want to see it. And around 2 seconds, and we go 650, so around 2 seconds before the video stops, we have the impact. So I'm gonna make the other keyframe here. So I'm gonna change this value to where we don't see the plane anymore, like somewhere here, and hover over offset, hit I again. Now we can see we created 2 keyframes. Unfortunately, they're easing in and out right now. We don't want that. Hover over my graph editor, hit T, hit linear. Now it's an even graph. So right now it's just moving from A to B. You see the speed definitely could be too slow, but again, my entire video is that length right now. So actually we can start this a little later, so it's also going to be faster, because when I look at this, I would start seeing the plane around, this is where it is, 3 seconds in. So the first 3 seconds, we don't even need this yet. So 3 seconds is 75 frames. Let's do 70. So we also don't need to render the first 70 frames. So we're gonna change this value in my output. Instead of frame 1, I'm gonna start on frame 70. The fewer frames we have to render, the better, because every frame can take minutes or hours sometimes. So now if you want to, I can even give it a bigger curve. Let's say I want this to swerve a little, like that. And even this one, I'm also gonna have like this. You can model those curves as much as you want. You can even add more vertices here and there. If you, I don't know, if you wanted to swerve even more, I just extrude it and have it like fly a little differently, which we don't want right now, but you can. Now you can see how it's like turned into this direction, even though it's like it's flying in a curve, but it should be like tilted this way basically while it's flying out. But we can also do that in the edit mode. Just select those, and under item you can just tilt it the way you need it to. So now it's like tilting. You can even animate this value if you want to. Now, why not? Let's try to set this thing on fire. Like one of those jets could be burning. Why not? So for that, I'm just gonna bring my 3D cursor right here. I'm gonna make, let's say, a cylinder. I rotate it more or less the same way this is tilted to. Bring it into the same position, just like that. Now I'm also gonna, the cylinder, make sure you apply the scale, so Control A, apply the scale. I'm also gonna, while this is selected, hold Shift and select your empty, hold Control P to parent it, keep transformation. Now the cylinder is going where this is going. Now to set it all on fire, I usually would recommend Embergen, because the fire is just super cool, looks very good. But since Embergen costs money, I'm gonna try to make this as good as possible inside of Blender. So what we're gonna do is, like with your cylinder selected, make sure your cylinder, you just name it, call it fire emitter. Okay, now I'm just gonna click on object, go down to quick effects and go on quick smoke. Now that created a domain. This domain here is going to be way too small because I needed to basically start here and go up until the ground. So I'm just going to scale it up like a lot. And to be honest, I've never created such a big domain for anything, so it might just not even be possible, but we will see. I'm just going to try to make it like the size I need it to. So I'm just going to go to top view and see where this graph is going. Basically I try to align this, because everywhere where the plane is, this is where the smoke has to go, and the domain here is basically the house for my smoke and my fire. So basically like this. Apply the scale. Now with your domain selected, you see this is called smoke domain. Let's go on the physics properties and see what it is. So right now we have gas or liquid. Gas is what we want. Under my fire emitter here, this is a flow, which is great, that's what I want. Under the settings, I see flow type. I could have fire and smoke or fire, and I think I'm gonna use smoke only could work, but I'm just gonna go with fire and smoke. And I am actually very excited to see if that's gonna work, because I have absolutely no idea. The resolution has to be pretty big, because right now this cube symbolizes the resolution of my smoke, which is this cube is bigger than my emitter, so that's definitely not going to work. So I have to increase the resolution by probably a lot. 64 is probably not going to be enough, so let's do 100. Let's go to adaptive domain, because adaptive domain is going to help me to actually keep the domain as small as possible. Dissolve, we're going to turn dissolve on. Slow, but we still want to keep it for a long time, so let's say like 500. We want it to start at 70 and end at 650. Now we can already see that there is some smoke going on. Under the shader editor, if you don't know how to find it, just make yourself a new screen with like vertical split or horizontal split. When you right click between those two things, make yourself a new shader editor, and this is basically the smoke or the fire right now. Obviously not looking too great, but it's definitely going in the right direction. Now let's look at this in cycles, what it would look like in cycles. And of course we don't have any lights set up right now, so let's just give our scene an HDRI, something what fits our environment. So So we're gonna go with outdoor, nature, midday, in something overcast, where we're gonna have very soft shadows. And in case you wonder what this is Polyhaven, another great plugin for free where you can just import HDRIs very easily. So that's pretty cool. So now we can see the actual smoke, and you see the steps. Since our smoke is moving pretty fast, we need more quality steps in between, and also the resolution is just too small. And now the smoke also needs to move around a little. So a lot of things we have to do to the smoke until we actually get some good results. So when you increase the vorticity, it definitely explodes a little more. And really, I don't need the smoke to do anything. If it just stays up there, that's fine too. But we definitely need some fire. And for the fire, we need to turn up the black body intensity. Now we can actually see the flame as well. If it's not enough, we need to crank this up so we can now actually see the fire. And you see all those boxes here. That is because we need a higher resolution. When I crank this number up, it's definitely going to be slower, but already you see it looks better. And we really need to see how much actually do we need to see, because it is very far away. So it really depends on that. Another thing you might want to do is turn up the anisotropy. That makes your smoke more backlit, which can make it look more realistic. Another cool thing you can do is when you go into the fire emitter, turn on initial velocity, maybe turn up normal to 1 or so, just to add some randomness in the smoke. Okay, now that we are satisfied with our fire on the plane, now we can move on and do something to the impact. So right when the plane hits the ground, I want it to be like a huge explosion, and we could do that inside of Blender too, but I would rather do that in Embergen because this is going to be way closer and it has to look good. And even if you don't have Embergen yourself, you can just go on the Embergen website, here it is, and you can try those assets for free. So I like, for example, this dust shockwave we could use, but I think this is going to be enough, the aerial explosion. So I'm just going to download the aerial explosion, and it's probably going to be a big file, but once you have it, you can just import Embergen's presets, the presets they have on their website, and can use them in your Blender scenes. Just keep in mind, explosions like that, they always come in VDBs, and VDB files are always massive. So just be aware that this could take a while. In case you do have Embergen or you want to try the trial, I'm going to show you real quick how you can use those explosions. So I'm just going to go in presets and see what they have here. The artillery explosion is basically great presets where you can start it. So I'm just going to click on this and can look at this explosions, which is just massive. It's beautiful. I love working with those. And this is all in real time. You see, I can look at it and I can just use this one. And for example, if I needed to be a little faster, I can just increase the time step to 100. Now this is a little slower. If I want it to be faster, I just do half of it, and that way I can just manipulate the explosion the way I want. I can even add colliders. Let's say I'm just going to make a collider. In Blender there would be a collision object, and under collider I just make a primitive. So now when I watch this, I play the explosion and this interacts in real time. You see that? I can go with my collision object through it and it's all in real time. That is awesome. So now I can just export this for, let's say, I don't need as much, I just need like 200 frames, probably not even. And for that, I just go in volume processing and make a new VDB export node and be like, I want 200 frames of this. I'm gonna make a new folder under directory, airplane crash, make a new folder here, explosion. And now I just hit export and I have to wait for a minute. It really depends on your computer. Sometimes it can take very long, sometimes it's faster. Really depends on your computer. This video is not sponsored by Embergen, but I do highly recommend it. It costs around $400 a year. Now the VDB is completed. So now I just have to import it into Blender. The way I'm gonna do that is first I'm just gonna mute the Fire domain I have right now, just so Blender is not gonna render for too long. Now Shift A and import volume, import open VDB, and this is my explosion. And now I'm just gonna select them all with A and import open VDB. Now we're not gonna see anything because usually those are always massive. They're very big. So I'm just gonna give my VDB a new material. Let's call it explosion. And it's gonna be a principled volume. So I'm just gonna scale it to the size I need it, which is somewhat small. Like basically like the size of the background here. Make sure it's gonna be in the right position, somewhere here, the right scale. And that's where I needed it to be. But I also needed to start way later. So I'm gonna go on the VDB settings. I'm gonna be like start frame. I'm gonna go where the plane crashes into the ground, which is somewhere here. And this is where the explosion already can start, which is frame 439. So 439 frames is 200. So this is where my explosion is going to start. And also my VDB has two grids. It has the density, which is here. This is the density. But also instead of temperature, I have to use flames. So I'm just going to type in flames instead. So now when I crank up the temperature, it should make the flames appear. And here, same deal with the anisotropy. Set it to 0.6. Unless it doesn't look as good, then just keep it on 0. Also, what you might want to do is turn off FastGI approximation, because then it's also going to look better. It's also going to render slower. Yeah, the size definitely has to be at least the size of my plane. So it's basically going to fill up the entire frame for sure. You might need to align your timing a little. So my plane is crashing a little too early, so I'm just going to move the destination a little further out so it aligns with my explosion. And of course, turn up your black body intensity so you can actually see your explosion. Adjust the temperature until you like what you see. Now when you're satisfied with that, also just turn off your explosion in the viewport so you can watch faster. And just remember where your plane crashes, which is like somewhere here. So also in addition to your explosion, you can have a particle explosion also. So we're just going to make a particle emitter right here. Just, it can be anything, just let's make it a regular plane like this size. Apply the scale. Now we're just going to make it a particle emitter. And I wanted to emit particles on frame 100. When does the explosion, when does the impact? Like at 460 till 480. I wanted to emit particles, and you see particles are being emitted. They just fall through the ground. Now I'm just going to give those particles a velocity, random velocity, and towards, I believe, positive y. Let's see what happens. Exactly, just blow them up. It might be a little too strong. Let's do 20, because I want to create particles where it just explodes random pieces of metal and maybe plane pieces, just random stuff up, just to add it to my explosion so there is some kind of a debris going on. Smack it. Like I said, so we're just gonna go on for 20 frames and then it's gonna stop. And now we're gonna create those particles, whatever we want. So I'm just gonna go to the side here, what we don't see in the frame, and I'm just gonna make my own view. Let's start with an icosphere. This icosphere doesn't have to have any subdivisions, just super low. I'm just going to zoom in here, and I'm just going to give it the engine part. Cool. I'm just going to create a few of those different sizes, manipulate the size a little, make it random, because there could be random airplane pieces. Apply the scale of all of them, and before you forget, just select them all, move them into a new collection, particle collection. I'm going to make a cube, and everything I do right now is just super random. So I'm just going to make a cube, make it flat, and I'm gonna give it another piece of another material of my plane. Again, Can be super random, and just gonna make a few different ones, and they are all, I hope, in the same collection. No, they should be in the same collection. Move into the particle collection. Now all those pieces should be in the particle collection. Did I forget something? No. So I also imported those random metal pieces, and I can just have them also in the same collection, because everything what I have in this collection is going to be random particles. Nice. Now I'm going to go back on my particle emitter, and now under render I can be like, don't render halos, render a collection, and render the collection I just made, the particle collection. Now all those pieces are going to get generated between frame 460 and 480, and they're just going to get blown up. And if we mix this with our explosion, it's going to look super cool, but we're not done yet, because right now they're just, you can maybe see that they're just moving without any rotation, and we do need the rotation. So we're just going to go on rotation, turn this on, and turn up phase. So now they're also rotated in different direction, but also just turn up randomness and phase. And all those pieces, they have gravity, so eventually they would fall. If I go to physics, Newton is on, so they do have gravity. I can make those pieces heavier, 10 pounds. Just remember, they have to render at least, or their lifetime has to be at least 90 frames. I'm going to do 100 because I want them to be alive until the end of the video. And with the smoke domain and my explosion, this is going to look super epic. And now when you're like happy with your result here, it's time to render all of this. Now just be aware of what actually you need in your scene. So I definitely don't need my ground here, so I'm just going to turn the ground off. I do need my smoke domain. I don't need my particle emitter. I don't need to see this, so I'm just going to go on my particle settings and turn off show emitter in the render. So it's just gonna be off in the render. If I also want it to be off in the viewport, do not have any confusion, turn it off here also. Now other settings which are important, we do have a lot of explosions and smoke, so you do need to crank up volume at least a little bit to like 4. Diffuse and glossy can stay on 2. Transmission 10. Transparent 10 2. Should be okay. Probably lower would be okay too. Fast GI approximation, you definitely want to turn off, because you can see the difference when you turn it on and off. If you turn this on like this, it's definitely going to render way faster, but it's not going to look as good. So you want to turn this off if you can. Keep simplify off. Motion blur, you want it on. Transparent on. If you have it off, you're going to see your HDRI. And I'm also going to render in film log. The reason for that is because I also recorded my video in log, in S-Log. So see, this is actually what it looks like. So that's going to make it easier to composite it later. And of course, I don't need my character anymore, so he's going to be gone. And under render settings, just depending on your machine, if you have a very good computer, you can go with 0.01 on your noise threshold. In max samples, you usually don't need more than 2000 or so, but it really depends on your computer. So I'm gonna go with 0.5. I'm just gonna render a frame and see how long it's gonna take. If that doesn't take too long, like let's say a minute or shorter, then I can crank up the settings a little more. So yeah, that took only 11 seconds. So let me see, I'm just gonna go to another frame, like let's say where the explosion hits the most. Render this frame again and see if that takes like way longer or shorter. So yeah, that took around 30 seconds. That's cool. Now I'm just gonna go to a frame like somewhere in the beginning, where the plane is somewhere in the background, and see how long a frame to render takes to render there. Only 3 seconds. That's awesome. So I'm satisfied with those settings. Again, if you have a better computer, rather crank up the noise threshold, go lower on this. Max samples, you really don't have to go too high there. When you're ready to render, go onto your file output, make a new folder wherever your folder is, call it airplane crash render, and accept it. Now make sure you render with RGBA, not RGB, RGBA. If you don't do that, you really mess up, because you do need all this transparent background, and this information is in this A, stands for alpha. Color depth I render in 16-bit usually, just a personal preference. PNG sequence is fine, and when you're ready, hit render and hope for the best. Now again, I started rendering on frame 70, so I still have like around 500 frames to render, and that's gonna take a while. While this is happening, let's see what we can set up in After Effects already. So I'm gonna open After Effects, or whatever compositing software you choose. I use After Effects. So I'm gonna import my video in After Effects, and don't be surprised if After Effects doesn't work as fast. Since you are rendering Blender right now, you should not really be working on anything else in the same time. So I just want to see how much I can do. If it doesn't work at all, I'm just going to take a break and continue this video in a few hours when the video is rendered. But I just want to show you what the next step is going to be. So I'm going to go to the frame where, let's start from the end. So I need to track this. So I'm going to select two tracking markers, and I believe I'm going to take this thing here and this thing here. I'm going to try to track that. So I'm going to open my tracking, my tracker, hit trick motion. I want position and rotation. I don't need scale. I'm going to make this a little bigger because my camera is moving a lot, because the camera guy, Matt, he was shaking a lot. I guess he was a little nervous. And I'm going to bring this here. Let's say I want to track this guy, and I want to track this guy. You want to pick something what is in the frame for most of the time, like this. Let's take the bottom here. And this square has to be as big as necessary, so it's going to be possible to track backwards. It's going to find it. So maybe if it's too big, it's going to render it too oopsie. It's going to render too slow, so you can make it a little smaller. But when I just try to render it backwards, you can see if it's tracking or not. But right now it looks good. So 1 second is already tracked. And now I just have to get through the entire footage, especially when it's like fast moving. I always stop and make sure everything is alright. Here the background is getting a little out of focus, or maybe it's motion blur, so I just have to be mindful of that and try to track it as good as possible. See, now the tracker jumped because it couldn't find it anymore, so I'm going to make it a little bigger. Go frame by frame. Here it didn't hit it anymore. And again, the smaller those are, the faster it's going to go. But every time it's moving too much, you always want to stop and make sure that it's not losing the trackers. You can see here I'm at 25 seconds, so I already tracked 3 seconds, which is great. In total, I think we have to get to like second 7 or so. And that's why it's important to find trackers which are never or not blocked by your subject or anything. Hopefully ever. If it happens, there's always fixes around it, but hopefully it doesn't. That's why I picked those trackers here far on the side. I know that I'm passing the frame in the beginning, so I'm gonna be blocking it at some point, but I'm gonna show you a workaround that too. So far I'm pretty happy with the trackers I picked here. Just especially when it gets like out of focus, then it becomes more difficult, but that's manual tracking for you. See, motion blur and fast movement always makes it very difficult, but everything is fixable if you just pay enough attention to detail. And in the end, if it's still messed up here and there, I can show you later also how to fix that, or just add extra camera shake to hide it. It's always a great move. And extra camera shake is generally a good idea if you have impact and explosions like that. You want to add that anyways. Here I'm still opening the umbrella. The idea is that the umbrella is supposed to protect me from the plane crash. And you might think it's stupid, and you are right, it is stupid. But the funny thing is, on social media, people have something to comment and be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense, or the acting is stupid. Yeah, but all that is engagement. So I'm gonna finish this on my own time, and then I'm gonna get back to you in a minute. Now at some point you might get into the situation that if you track backwards the next frame, you're gonna start blocking the trackers you've been using all the time. And at this moment I would just move both trackers to a whole different point where you believe, okay, it's going to be in there until the very end. And of course you're going to have a jump, but later you can just remove the jump, and I'm going to show you later how. Just move your two tracking markers to something in the same distance, so it's not going to be too off, and something what is trackable that might not be. But let's say maybe at this point here also has a lot of contrast, and maybe this. So now I'm going to keep tracking backwards until eventually it's going to start blocking it again, and now you can just move them back to where they were before, which was this marker and right here. And now I should be able to track through to the very beginning. And yeah, it can become very difficult to track this, especially with like that much motion blur going on. There's a lot of movement, but that's just how it is. But then you can just imagine how difficult that would be to track this inside of Blender. In After Effects you really have more control over your markers, and all we do really is a 2D track for a 2D scene, because all of our CG, all of our 3D visual effects are so far in the distance that they don't need to be tracked in a 3D environment. Hopefully. I still haven't seen the end result. You have, so you tell me if it worked, but I am sure it's gonna be fine. Amazing. Once you tracked everything, let's just hope it all worked. We're gonna make a new object. Go in Layer, New, Null Object, and now edit Target and select the null object you just created. Hit OK. Now apply X and Y. Now all of this information is in this null object. So we're gonna go to, let's say we're gonna go to the frame, like somewhere here. This is like the frame where we align our camera, so we can use 15 seconds 22, and that's where we're gonna add our 3D render once it's done. It's still rendering. We are at 614 frames right now, so it's still gonna be like another 40 frames. So you can see what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna add a solid, pink solid. I'm gonna make a plane. Okay, this is gonna be our placeholder for the plane. Now I toggle switch between the modes, and this is my parent, so I can parent my plane to my null object. Now wherever my null object is going, this is where my plane is going to, and that is pretty cool. So everything I can track, everything is tracked and is going to be in the background. And every time something is jittering too much, which I can see here, I can see my whole movement. If something is off, especially the part where I had to jump, like in the beginning, because I had to jump back and forth twice, I'm going to go to those two frames. This is going to be like one of them, because I see this long line here, because this is where I blocked the keyframe, so I made it jump. So now I just have to select those two keyframes, all the keyframes where I tracked it here. So it's starting with this one on frame, like on frame 73 and till here. So I'm going to select those keyframes and move it back where it belongs. So now the jitter, and I do that with the null objects. This is where my tracking information is. And if there's still a jitter, I can always just delete keyframes in between. And now for the second bump, I can do the same thing. See, this is where the bump is happening. I'm just going to select all the keyframes after this bump. I'm looking where this bump is happening and jumping down there. I'm just going to bring this closer here. Now this bump shouldn't be as significant. That's basically manual tracking. See, you don't see a thing. Now there's going to be a few things we probably have to do, especially in the very end of our shot. Rotoscoping this guy out, which is me, and also the buildings. Both of that needs to be rotoscoped, probably individually. We're also going to start from the end there, because in the end it's more important. So the way we're going to do that is, let's just start with me, because it's simpler to explain. You Shift D, you have this layer, bring it on top. I'm just gonna make the magenta thing, what I make. I just remove the mask, so it's gonna fill the entire frame, so you see. So this thing again symbolizes all our visual effects, because you can see that the explosion is going to be filling up the frame, so this is going to be a lot. So now we need to cut out myself frame by frame. And we might have to do that through the entire video, probably not. I'll just start here because I think the plane is going to be like somewhere here, so we might have to cut out the tree and myself and of course the buildings. So let's do that. I'm going to double click my video here, go in rotor brush tool. Now I can just draw over my body. I don't have to be very exact here because like I said, it's going to be the whole buildings too. So all of this basically. The only exact part has to be the hair. But even the hair could be done with a Luma key. Actually, now when I think of it, let's try that first because rotoscope is a great tool. I love it, but it does take longer for the computer. So instead of that, let's just try to use a key because we have a very clear sky, like one color. And if we go to like effect, keying, linear color key, let's try to key the whites. And again, it's mostly those edges what I'm worried about. So here you can adjust the tolerance and the softness. So right now everything what is pink should be pink because I want to cut out all those edges here, but just not too much. And here when I click on matte only, I can have only a black and white mask, which is very helpful, especially when you want to use this as a mask actually. So I can adjust the softness individually until black is black and white is white. Something like that. And now, like I said, those edges are the most important part. Now I'm going to duplicate my layer one more time, bring it to the top. I'm going to use the track matte just like with my green screen effect. Now it's using this information just for the mask. Increase the softness a little. Great, and our render is done now too. So now we can just replace this magenta image with our actual video, and then we're actually going to see if all of this actually works. So let's go to the frame. I think it was like 15 seconds. This is where the alignment of our scene was, somewhere here. Now I'm going to import, double click on in After Effects, viewport, find your airplane scene, airplane renderer. Now I'm just going to import this, import, there you go. Here make sure to go on select your image sequence, interpret footage, make sure these numbers are aligned. So you have the same frame rate. Now you're just going to drag and drop your scene in here. So I have my plane here in the background. Obviously right now it's not tracked, but we can solve that in a second. Just parent and link, parent it to the null object we created earlier, and now it all should be tracked. Oh, there's an airplane there in the background. Here should be blocked by me, so I know I have to rotoscope myself out here. But I can also, because it would be blocked by me a lot, so I think I might just move the entire plane to the right. So yeah, let's move the plane completely further to the right. Also, we need to scale it up 200%. That's the actual size because we rendered in full HD, not in 4K. Our video is in 4K, so this is the actual size. This is the explosion, which should happen a little later, right here. When I hide myself, this is where the explosion should happen. So I'm gonna bring the video further to the right. Yeah, when we bring the video below our key, we see that it's actually happening behind our subject and behind the buildings and everything. That looks pretty cool. Obviously it's not perfect yet. Mainly we have some issues like the mask we made. We can see all those white edges, so I wonder if we can fix that somehow, because we don't have that many settings here. So if I just matching tolerance, if I increase this a little, it looks a little better. But then hold on, yeah, you see then the explosion happens also in front of the building. I don't want that, so that has to be like very high. And also you can just draw a mask on top where you want to show your actual video. Especially here in the end, you can see I'm getting like this edge here. I can just minimize the mask, or make the mask a little smaller and feather it so it's a little more better of a transition. And here again you can see like my hair is flipping out a little. So that's the tricky part, to adjust all that. But at least then I don't have to cut myself out frame by frame. Yeah, you see issues like this, that it's like half transparent and stuff like that. You don't want this at all. -300. Another issue is that we started the video a little late. I forgot why we started so late, but It's not a big issue because we need this plane a little earlier. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this. I'm going to freeze the frame, the time, freeze. Okay, I'm going to animate the position here, and let's say also the scale. So position and scale have a keyframe right here, and then I'm going to go to the beginning, or like wherever we see it first, which is like here. So let's say we're going to go here now. So I'm going to scale it down and position it here. So it's like back here, and of course I don't want to have it twice. So here is going to be a smooth transition from one plane to the other, and now starts a little earlier. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to put those two in one. I'm going to make a pre-comp out of this. So all the effects I do, they're going to be on both of them. So now I'm going to bring the opacity down to 80%. So you see the opacity is like lower now. I might even go lower than that, so it looks like it's part of the atmosphere. So, and the closer it gets, the more visible it's going to become. So when it's like down here, it's going to be on 100, but it's going to be a smooth transition. So it looks like it's behind the clouds or inside the clouds and stuff like that. Also, since the camera is shaking so much, I also need to turn on motion blur on those things. But yeah, we are definitely getting closer. Okay, the impact should be here on my reaction. Bam, I'm reacting to it. But this is where the impact should be. So let me move this. So the trickiest part about this thing is really like the bad tracking. It's definitely not perfect, but the camera is shaking so much that I hope in the movement we're not really going to see. Also, I'm going to add extra camera shake on top of that just in a second. As long as I have a good thumbnail, like something like this, it's going to be the thumbnail. It's going to be cool. Okay, let's move on because I could be fixing this for like ever, but you do get the point. Now, what the things I'm going to add on top of this. So I'm just going to add some assets I have from videocopilot.net. I'm going to use the Actual Essentials pack, but you can use any dust assets you have or you can find on the internet. I'm going to use Dust Wave and Dust Add Cam on the impact here. Those always look good. I'm just going to scale it up and cool. And the good thing is I have a null object already, so I can just track it to it. So it's going to be moving like the way the camera is moving, and that is just going to help to sell the effect because it's going to be all on top of each other. It should be a little later and also a little bigger and also a little more transparent. I don't want it to be that thick. And so you see how it nicely puts like everything closer together. And that's that cam. Let's see what that looks like. Those usually might be too much. Oh yeah, that's nice. I also like to blur out my mask a little because that might help to sell the effect here. And another effect called Matte Choker, I believe. Maybe it was Simple Choker. Nope, that doesn't do anything. Yeah, playing with those settings until this mask looks a little better because you see how sharp this is. You really don't want this. Now, we want to add a glow to this explosion. So I'm going to add a solid, give it the color of the explosion, and now I usually use something like overlay, maybe soft lights, just like that. Now I'm going to make a circle, like a mask, over this area where the explosion happens, feather it. So on the impact of the explosion, I'm going to bring the opacity up. So just go up, up, up. This is where the explosion is the brightest. So now we're going to increase this, and while it's going, it's fine. And then we're going to make another keyframe when it's the explosion, the fire part stops, and slowly fade it back out. So while the explosion happens, we have a nice glow over the entire shot. See the before after? Just brings the entire image closer together. It like brings it to one. And for the same effect, what I like to do is I use Video Copilot's optical flares. If you don't have optical flares, that's not a problem. You can just download LensDirt. Go on Google and download LensDirt. It's all over the place. I just use optical flare because it's faster. I have it like right here, and the way that's gonna look, set this to screen, like your flare also, or your LensDirt also set it to screen. Now here I'm gonna animate it, bring the brightness to 0, and when the explosion is the brightest, bring the LensDirt up and slowly fade it back out. maybe not to 0, you can just keep it a little bit, and now you have a little bit of Linster while this is happening. Amazing. It's always cool to add, like this is just an explosion, you can just add this on top of everything, make it huge, like huge like this, and now blur it, and of course align it with your actual explosion. Now just turn down the opacity so it's just a soft glow and everything. Nice. Okay, again, I could be working on this like for 1 billion hours, but let's move on to the good stuff, which is gonna be, I'm gonna bring everything besides the lens dirt stays out, everything else I'm gonna bring into a new composition. So I'm gonna pre-comp it, call it all, there you go. Now in all this, you can see it all still works, it's just in fewer layers, explosion, great. Now I'm gonna hit P, hold Alt and click on the position, there you go, and type in wiggle 1, 30 or 20. Now what it does is it's going to add camera shake, digital camera shake on top of the actual camera shake, which is going to mix those two camera shakes together, so it's like harder to tell that the tracking is not perfect. That's why I do this. So you can see on those black edges here, this is how it's moving. When I make those numbers bigger, if I make the first number bigger, then it's going to move faster. The second number is the amount. So when I make it 100 instead, or this is 1,000, now it's like moving like a lot, and that would be like, of course, too much. But like something like 20, that works. Let's try 30. Yeah, 30 is good. Now we're going to do the same thing to the rotation. R, Alt, stopwatch, wiggle. Let's do 2, 1. So now it's going to be rotating like this as well. Now of course I'm going to make it a little bigger, so we're going to lose those black edges, and now I'm just going to watch it, and every time I see the tracking looks weird, like for example here you see the tracking is stupid, I'm going to just have a quick zoom in. So I'm going to keyframe the scale and the position. I'm going to have a quick, even though it might not make sense, quick zoom in, and here quick zoom out to its original position. So it looks like, okay, it's shot on an iPhone, it's like quick zoom in, what's going on, zoom out, and looking around. See, the tracking was weird again. So I'm just going to do the same thing, zoom in, zoom out. So we're just not really going to see it. I'm just looking at the plane, hoping that the tracking is good, and if not, I'm just going to get it. There you go. Now it started being weird again. I'm just going to give it another quick zoom in, zoom out. Although I don't want it to zoom on the plane, I want it to zoom on me, because that's like part of the joke that I'm like hiding behind this coat. And now I'm looking back on the plane, hoping the tracking is going to be good. Looks fine right now, looks fine. There was a little jitter. And instead of zoom in, zoom out, I can also just 2 keyframes here, adjust the position, and select them both, go in Wiggler, type in 12, and maybe 10, apply. Now I'm gonna add a wiggle. It was not enough, let's do 30, apply. That basically adds a camera shake to it. That was too much, let's do 12, apply. So now everything is shaking, so we can't really tell that the airplane is shaking individually a little. We can even add a little more, because it might be that the camera guy is a little scared. Now here on the impact, we definitely want camera shake, so I'm just going to copy paste this even longer, until the end. Bam. And here, instead of a zoom in, zoom out, I could also just do the camera shake instead. Might be better a little later. It's not bad, so we're not going to see the weird camera movement or the weird tracking. So one more thing I want to do, because I don't like the first moment of the explosion, so I try to cover it up with another explosion. I'm just going to add this right here. Cool. Now, super important, before you render, make sure to give it motion blur. Add this button and this button, so it all has motion blur with the extra camera movement you gave it. Otherwise, it's going to look a little choppy if it doesn't have motion blur. You see the difference? Also, I'm going to bring this entire image closer together. Now, one more thing. You know the move I like to do. Give it a new adjustment layer on top of everything, literally everything, and right click or go in effects and give it a 3D glasses rather, and also optics compensation, that one. Now under 3D glasses, we're gonna go on the left eye, use the adjustment layer, and under the 3D view, balance colored red and blue. That's all we need. Now under optics compensation, just gonna add like 8 degrees, like 12. Now we're just gonna have the edges, you know, it's gonna look more real as if it was shot on a film camera. And the last move, the very last thing, I'm gonna add film grain, just some noise. You can also just use the After Effects noise, but I have my assets here under Action Essentials, film grain, the clean one. This is what it looks like. It's just grain, literally. You can download it on the internet, put it also on top of everything. The mode goes on overlay, scale it up that it fills the frame, and maybe turn it down to like 40% or so, and make sure that you have enough of those. If it's not long enough, you have to duplicate them with Command or Control D, that you can align them properly, that it fills the entire shot. And I know this took forever. It's probably the longest video I've ever made, but if you put everything together, this is the result. So that was a lot. I think I've been working on this video, just shooting the video, making the video, like 9 hours or so. So I don't know how long this video is now. It's probably like at least an hour long. So I apologize, but I hope you got something out of it. I think it's a pretty cool effect. I liked the result. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And see you in the next video. Toodaloo.